Dr. Paul Savage, MD, is the founder and CEO of MD Lifespan in Chicago, Illinois. At 37, Dr. Savage was a successful ER and trauma physician, but he didn't feel so good and he didn't look so good, according to him. I didn't know him at that point. He was unhealthy, weighed a hearty 267 pounds, smoked, oh my God, was tired, anxious, and unwell. Had high cholesterol, high blood pressure, was pre-diabetic, and under tremendous stress. So he looked for a better solution than taking a lot of medicine. He was born an investigator with keen curiosity, and he was determined to improve his health. So after researching and exploring every method and treatment that promised results, he made lifestyle changes, nutrition, supplements, hormones, IV therapy, stem cell therapy, and now even more part of his studies for both himself and ultimately, I think, his patients. It led him to embrace integrative medicine and an evidence-based approach. So that turns a patient into a partner, something I believed in for my entire career. And he focused on the whole person with an array of scientific disciplines to heal illness and disease. 25 years later, wow, he did a good job. Doesn't look like 25 years. Dr. Savage is healthy, strong, vibrant, and passionate about his life's work, combining traditional and integrative medicine to keep himself and his patients in top physical and mental conditions. His lecture is the featured lecture this morning, Reversing the Biomarkers of Aging and Reducing Toxins with Therapeutic PlasmaXchange. I want to say that I've done this experiment on myself, working with somebody who's well known in the field, Dr. Dibrav, and I found that I reversed my chronological age after getting 3 monthly treatments by 15 years, my biological age, which I tested also monthly with another group. And then I stopped sleeping enough because I was creating an app that we're working on to do virtual medicine. And my biological age bounced back up more than 15 years. So this is a phenomenal finding that I'm really excited to learn more about. But don't forget the basics. Sleep is one of the basics. All right. Thank you, Dr. Savage.
Yeah. I like to walk around, so excuse me for a few minutes by the sound techs, because I like the mobile mic as well. My name is Dr. Paul Savage, and I am very honored and very happy to be back here today at AMMG. As Flo was telling you, I've had a really interesting course in my life. Having been an ER doctor at the world's largest trauma center, I was the evening guy for 10 years. And at the end of 10 years, like she said, I went to see my doctor. He was putting me on my 7th medicine. I smoked, I drank, I worked the night shift, so I had swing shift disorder, although we didn't know what that was, 267 pounds, and really didn't watch what I was eating, because if you worked in the ER, you eat whatever they bring in at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's never healthy stuff. It's usually we had pancit or fried chicken or Burger King if things got bad. And my doctor told me, at that time I was 36, and he's like, if you don't change, you're going to follow every guy in your family, because everybody in my family, all the guys, died before 65 years old. Now, that got my attention, and he said he knew I had heart disease at that point as well, at a very young age, and that's a cancer and heart disease are what everybody in my family died from. So I took it seriously, and I thought, I'm going to go out and I'm going to get healthy. And I walked out of his office, and I was walking down his walkway towards my car, and I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and realized I have no idea how to do that. I don't know what kind of exercise. Am I supposed to do? Lift weights, run? Am I supposed to do I don't know. What am I supposed to eat? Vegetables I get, but which vegetables and what else? I really didn't have a clue for any of that. And I started doing my own thing and working with a trainer, nutritionist, and 6 months later, I'm 13 pounds fatter. And I was like, I was bemoaning to my trainer that nothing was working. And I was having a real hard time gaining muscle and losing fat. And this was 1999. And a bodybuilder walked past us, and he just looked at me, and he goes, one of the big gorillas, he walked by me, he goes, you need testosterone. And he walked off. I was like, dude, that's insane. That causes prostate cancer. It causes heart disease. Remember, this is 1999. But I thought more about it, and I thought more about it. I said, well, I guess that kind of makes sense. I started looking up. I'm an ER doc. I don't know about testosterone deficiency. I started looking it up, and I'm like, wow, that is kind of where I'm at. So I went to my endocrinologist and said, Neil, you need to give me testosterone. He goes, well, I can't. I said, what do you mean you can't? He goes, you don't qualify. What do you mean I don't qualify? My testosterone level's 90. And he goes, it's illegal for us to prescribe testosterone for you because you don't have a head injury and you haven't had an orchectomy. It's in the Anti-Steroid Abuse Act. And I was like, that's insane. So then I go, what everybody did at that time, I'm going to look on the black market to try to find some testosterone because I'm sure that's what I need. And I started looking online, and I found Cytogenix, and I found Alan Mintz, and I found David Leonardo, and I found Alvin Lin, and you guys may or may not know these people, but they were godsend for me. Put me on growth hormone, testosterone. 7 months later, I'm 70 pounds down of fat, 30 pounds up on muscle. The lights came on, my energy came back, my passion for life came back. And I really felt like I had been given a completely different turn on life. And I went to the director of the emergency room, I gave him my resignation, and I said, I'm leaving. And he goes, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to open a bunch of clinics, and I'm going to treat guys with testosterone. Even though it's questionable on the legality of it, this is what I'm going to do. And I became one of the Cytogenix people early on in Chicago. And he goes, that's insane. I said, maybe, but I'm going to do it. He goes, you think people are going to make cash for you? I said, I do. And I opened my practice, and 2 months later, Suzanne Summers walked into my office, and she goes, you're the only person in Chicago that's doing bioidentical hormones, but you're only doing it for guys. You need to do it for the women. And I said, okay. She goes, because if you treat the women, they'll bring their husbands. I thought, this is brilliant. She really is brilliant. I don't know how many people I ever had a chance to meet Suzanne, but her and I were friends for quite a long time, but she really transformed my journey, and I started doing bioidentical hormones, and I built a company called Body Logic MD. But what I want to talk to you all about, because I'm sure, because you're here, you've all had this moment, these aha moments that you have in your career. One of my aha moments was testosterone. This shit works. I'm going to go do this for everybody else. That was an aha. And then I called up my brother, and I said, because he always said, we should do something business-wise, since he's a business person. And I said, I called him up, he was in Hawaii, and I said, steroids. And he's like, what? And I said, steroids. We're going to go do steroids. And he was like, what? And it took him a little while, but he got on board with it. And this was 2002, and by 2007, we had built a company called Body Logic MD, which had 50 centers throughout the country, and it was one of the largest networks of physicians who were trained in giving hormone therapy, and we were quite successful at it. I left Body Logic because I'm a mathematician. I'm a computer guy. I'm a data analyst. I like data. And the whole goal was to build a software system with all these clinics and start gathering data. And he wasn't really interested in that. So I left the company. And because we needed a data system in this field, because everybody who, maybe even today, but years ago you had QuickBooks, then you had a scheduling program, and then you had a note-taking system, and then you had to go to every online lab to download all the results and analyze. It was a real pain to do it. So I built a company called Power to Practice, which is one of the EMRs in this integrative space that actually is very specific for what we do. And it made my job incredibly easy. And when we got it up to over 3 million patients, I decided, okay, I'm ready to leave, because I'm the startup guy. And so I left that. And we started up 27 different clinics called Forum Health, had a great time with that, but I decided that was enough of that for me, and I retired in August of 2022. This is when I got Dobry Kiprof's paper about PlasmaXchange, and it was phenomenal. That paper I got on August 30th, I got a little bit before the pre-release, and I read that article 12 times in the next 2 days. I analyzed the numbers, and I was floored, because in this world that we live in of age management, we all know that the 5 tenets are exercise, nutrition, stress management, sleep, and detoxification. And when you've been in the field for 25 years, as I have, you realize that the one area we do really not very well in, because we don't have anything that works, was detoxification. In the last 10 years of my career, I've been watching toxin testing on people, And 10 years ago, 70% of my clients had high critical levels of toxins. 5 years ago, 90% of my clients had high critical levels of toxins. This year, nobody was negative. And I will go over that data as well, but every patient I tested, and the fewest anybody had was 3. The most they had was 33, and this is out of the 100 toxins we tested. It's a growing existential threat to our existence in this world, period. Now we're seeing all these things with cancer in younger patients. We're seeing Alzheimer's worse and occurring in younger people, ALS, Parkinson's, and we see all the vets who are getting Parkinson's because of all the exposure they have to all these chemicals. And you start to realize we're not going to survive in this world. The toxins will not let us. But that's when I realized from this paper that I think I had an answer. So this is my current aha moment that we're going to share with you right now. Before I do so, there are a lot of people I need to thank for this, but 2 I want to point out really specifically. One is Dr. Jin Shi. He's a colleague of mine. He's a data scientist. He's eminently a data scientist. And if you know anything about Google Scholar, he's got a score of 78, which I've never met anybody with a 78. That means he's cited over 20,000 times. He's written hundreds of articles, but he's really good in the area of laboratory testing, biomarkers, and bioanalytics. And he was one of the persons I leaned on to, let's build this thing as we start to move it out. And the other one is a longtime friend and colleague of mine, Paul Anderson, who is, in my opinion, one of the smartest detoxicologists I've ever met. And what I mean by that is, what he's done for 30 years is come up with protocols on how to get all these various toxins out of people, whether it was heavy metals or pesticides or mycotoxins. Paul would have a various, and this was all science-based, and they would work. But they would be incredibly labor-intensive, as all of us know who's done this for a while. It's hard to get out toxins from people. And then myself, I'm kind of the data guy, but I think I've gotten a name in the field of being the guy who takes things and makes them into things that work. I like processes. I like to imagine how we can make this real, and then I go ahead and do that. So we're talking today about toxins. You all understand that we now live in a toxic universe that's getting worse every year. You all understand that these toxins are in all of us. It's in our loved ones, it's in our family, our friends, and our colleagues, and our clients. And you all understand that these toxins are becoming an increasingly dangerous risk for all of us. Yet there's very little we can do because we can't seem to get the government to stop putting them in the environment. We're increasing these toxins by about 5,000 new toxins every year. I don't know if you know who said stupidity or pollution and stupidity remain the greatest existential threat to mankind. And this was said by Stephen Hawking a month before he died of Lou Gehrig's disease, which every neurologist will tell you is caused by toxins, probably BMAA, which is a blue algae toxin that they related to the people who eat more of this have a very high incidence of Alzheimer's or of ALS. But I'm telling you, it's not only that toxin. There's a lot of toxins that do this, and we're not dealing with just one toxin. We're dealing with more than that. Because what are toxins? Well, it's easy to say they're toxic, and I try to tell that to my clients because I want them to understand there's nothing good about a toxin. There is in no way a toxin is going to be beneficial for you in any way. They cripple our enzyme system. I always tell my clients, if you want to think about toxins, think about them as the antivitamin. Because we all know to have an enzyme to work, you need cofactors. Those are nutrients and vitamins. And you have to have all of them for that enzyme to work well. Toxins are the opposite. They occupy those spots on the enzyme without activating the enzyme, or they literally burn and destroy the enzyme. So they cripple every biopathway we have in the body. They interfere with the hormones, not only on the receptor where they interfere with taking the space of the hormone and keeping the receptor from working and engaging and blocking the hormone, but they also affect the organs that give off the hormones and the signals to the organs that you need more hormones in every different way toxins interfere with every hormonal. So when we talk about hormone dysfunction from toxins, we're talking on every single level of the axis these toxins occur. They damage organs. They literally burn the cells. They modify your gene expression, so your DNA is not giving the message it's supposed to give, and it triggers messages from your DNA that you don't want to give, and then they also break the DNA. There's nothing good about toxins, and the worst thing that toxins do is they impair your ability to get rid of toxins. The CDC, in every release of paper that they've given in the last year, and all of us are seeing, if you pay attention, because I don't even think you have to be aware of all the increasing amount of articles that are coming about toxins. And the CDC is now saying every doctor should test their patients for forever chemicals because 99% of them have this, and it's a very dangerous chemical to have. Yet in the same statement, they'll say the United States Force, which is the ones that are responsible for detoxicology in the government, there is no way to get these things out, is what they say. But we should monitor it so we can get patients aware on how they can avoid entering more of these things in, because that's the only thing that we currently have to reduce these toxins. This is something that started by us, the human race, around 1960, when we started putting pesticides and herbicides into the fields. And then we started digging into the dirt to get the heavy metals that we needed to run our electronics. And then more cars and more energy requirement means burning more fossil fuel. And then all of this stuff started into an industrial boom of manufacturing, which had all these different chemicals that were now entered into our environments. We started it. It started in 1960. The interesting thing is, I remember this Crying Indian commercial. Some of you may, if you're 60 as I am. And this was really impactful because this came out in 71. And this is only 10 years after we started. And even then we knew we had a problem brewing, but it really hasn't got enough attention. We now live in what scientists call a toxic planet. We now have so many toxins in the environment that it's affecting every level of the environmental system that it's become a danger to us. We now know that currently there's over 140,000 toxins man-made in our environment, and this is increasing by 5,000 every year. And the amount of toxins that are being pushed into the environment are becoming even higher and higher in the amount that we're putting in. Currently, this past year, 250 billion tons of toxins were introduced into the United States ecostructure. How much is that? Well, if you're wondering about 144,000 toxins, and the fact that we can measure about 120, 150 this in the clinical setting, that's like a 6-foot man looking at a 7,000 tall mountain. We just don't have the ability to track all these toxins. We have some toxins we can track, but not all of them. And we're talking about having over 35 different heavy metals. We're talking about having over 12,000 different forever chemicals. We're having over 17,000 pesticides, 35,000 herbicides, and over 54,000 phthalates in every gram of food that everybody eats every day. That should be very worrisome to all of us, and it is. Paul Anderson, as I said, who's my colleague, who's a detoxicologist, will say, and he's come up with all these protocols, these toxins are notoriously difficult and very slow to get out of the system. Now, there's a lot of people out there say they have detox diets. And this is one of the things that traditional medicine and Western medicine has criticized the integrated space for, because you're really not getting the toxins out with detox diets. What you're doing is neutralizing the inflammation and the oxidation downstream, so you're seeing improvement in those markers, but you're not actually getting out the toxins. There is very few programs that work that get out these toxins, and when you do, they're very labor intensive and they're very long for patients to do. The leading cause of death in the United States, we all know this, right? Or do we? No, the son me, our doctor, this was our bread and butter every day. Because we used to think that number four now is COVID. And everybody's like, wait, that's not right. COVID's number 3. No, it's now number 4. Number 3 is cancer. That used to be number 2. Number 2 is heart disease. As of September 2023, the World Health Organization has now listed toxins as the leading cause of death, responsible for 1 in 4 deaths in the world. It's from toxins that we've invented or put into the system itself. So what are the symptoms of toxins? Well, the answer is there usually isn't any. Not anything specific. People complain of fatigue. They complain of all sorts of different problems. But you really understand when somebody has a toxin when they get a disease. When you see the Alzheimer's, when you see the heart disease, when you see the Parkinson's, when you see the immune system dysfunctions, when you see these things coming in, and these are what toxins do because they are the epitome of the silent killers. No longer is it diabetes and hypertension, it's now toxins, because toxins are linked to everything that we called the silent killer before. So it's the ultimate ninja. So we now move forward to PlasmaXchange. I'm going to give a brief tutorial for what PlasmaXchange is for people who are not very familiar with it, but in essence, PlasmaXchange is an oil change for humans. What we're doing is taking out your blood and we mix it with a little citrate to keep the blood thinner. It's a very mild anticoagulant. It binds up calcium, and without calcium, the coag factors cannot work. And then we centrifuge it, and we separate the cells from the plasma. You can see the plasma being gathered in the upper right-hand corner there, and as it's being gathered, then it'll be flushed down to a waste receptacle down on the side, because you're going to fill that unit there about 3 times, maybe a little bit more, through one process. Because what this does is it basically takes out 72% of your plasma in one PlasmaXchange. That means one session. And in return, we put it back, we put all the cells back in with albumin and saline. It acts as a space holder, both osmotically and nutrient or electrolyte as, to you generate new plasma yourself within about 24 to 36 hours. So what we basically did is took out all the old, toxic, inflamed, oxidized plasma, and we let you build in new, fresh, non-oxidized, non-inflamed, non-toxic plasma. And then we wait about a month, and we repeat it again and again and again. So if we're doing 72, and I'm a mathematician, so I understand the fallacy of what I'm going to say, but it's essentially the first time we're doing 72% of your plasma. By the time we do a second PlasmaXchange, we've done about 91% of your plasma. The third is 96, the fourth is 99, the fifth is almost 100%. That's why when you start hearing about PlasmaXchange, you're going to hear about a series of 5, because that's how many you need to reach about a complete exchange of a human's plasma. It's used in over 167 diseases. And what we know about the plasma, the reason we give back albumin, because a lot of people are out there saying, let's use plasma. That's the young blood theory that we talked about, or that we've heard about. And people are like, hey, we'll take all these young guys' plasma, and we're going to give it to all these older guys in the exchange. So we'll take out their plasma and give them young plasma, because not only is it less toxic, but it has all these growth hormones associated with it. I'm an old trauma doc. For 10 years, I would have trauma patients come in, and as I'm putting up the 10th unit of plasma, I'm wondering what's going to kill them, the trauma or the plasma, because there are a lot of side effects associated with giving somebody multiple different persons' plasma, because you're never going to get all the antibodies under control, no matter how well you test, because there's just some we don't know how to test for at this point. But when you use albumin, you have a very low incidence of side effects. You have some people, they get a little bit of a rash. They can get a little bit hypotensive because we're exchanging fluids, but it's a 1-to-1 transfer. But sometimes after you've taken all that inflammation out and all those toxins out, the vascular system goes, and it relaxes. And so we have a transient drop in their blood pressure. We give them a little saline, they get better. They get a little itching because the citrate and the low calcium, they scratch their nose, they scratch their cheek, they scratch their fingers. But all these things can be averted and treated even before you start the program by just making sure they eat a really good breakfast so they don't get hypoglycemic. Again, we're taking 70% plasma. That means we're taking out the blood sugar. And then we give them Tums, which is calcium, to eat beforehand to neutralize the effects of the citrate. And then we give them fluids, and we make sure that they eat or drink something during the procedure. So we're always keeping fluids and electrolytes and sugar going back in. And it's incredibly safe. This has been used in over 50 years on patients. But when we start using plasma, that goes up to 27% side effects. And they're not good side effects. We're talking about not just a rash, we're talking about anaphylaxis. And the worst case scenario, and this happens in 1 in 1,000 cases of plasma exchange, with plasma, you're going to end up with transfusion-related acute injury to the lung, TRAIL. And this person will fill up their lungs while they're there in your office, and then you'll have to intubate them, and you may get them into the ICU fast enough to avoid them dying, because it's basically rapid onset ARDS. So all these people are like, we're doing this plasma transfusion on people. I'm saying in longevity medicine, our purpose is to help people live longer, not kill them. It sounds basic, but that's the truth. And there have been people that the FDA has tried because they used plasma and they came out with bad side effects, including a death. Plasma exchange has been around for 50 years. I used to use it in the emergency room. I remember an overdose on a 16-year-old who wanted to commit suicide, went into grandma's room, took all of her digitalis, and swallowed it. She came in with a heart rate of 4. As long as she laid down, she was fine. She was 16, but 4 beats per minute. We hooked her up to the plasma exchange. Digitalis is all protein bound. We pulled it out. 2 hours later, she was able to go home doing fine. So this has been around a long time. It has over 167 known diseases it's been used for, mostly in the autoimmune space. Guillain-Barré is quite popular that this is, but even in that, TPE isn't the first-line therapy. It's a third-line and a fourth-line therapy, which is why it's not something that's always on our radar. But it's been around forever, and the companies that make the machine now manages everything. So if you just listen to the machine and don't override its logic with yours, you're going to be fine. We've done hundreds of plasma exchanges in our office in the last year. I mean, I stopped counting because as many we've done, and we've never had a significant problem. We've had people get low hypovolemic, we had people get low hypoglycemic, we've had people get the itching, we had one patient get the rash. It's not anaphylactic, it's just this really itchy rash that you can treat with calcium and steroids. But it's a very safe procedure. This all started because of the studies that were done in 2005 by the Conboys, who are Stanford PhDs, who took an old, fat, arthritic mouse, a human equivalent age of 70, and a young, lean, brown mouse, human equivalent age about 20, and they tied the circulatory system together, and 6 weeks later, the old mouse got substantially younger. Everybody, this was published. This type of test had been done for a very long time, but not towards aging. Everybody repeated this worldwide. This had to be done 10,000 times in the next 7 years. Bezos invested in a pharmacy and spent a lot of money to try to find out the magic particle that the young mouse was giving the old mouse that made the old mouse younger. Peter Thiel from PayPal invested in an AI program to try to figure out that way what the particle was, and everybody came up empty 7 years later, until 2012 when somebody came up to a podium and knocked on the mic one day and said, "You're looking at the wrong mouse." It wasn't that what was in the young mouse that made the old mouse younger, it was what's in the old mouse that was making the old mouse older. And that everybody went, oh, if that's the case, we should be able to do a plasma exchange on the mouse, and in fact, that worked incredibly well. So everybody realized that now we're not dealing with a product in the plasma that's really making the old mouse younger. It's getting the toxins out. But what they felt at that time, and this is a study by Dobry Kiprov and the Cowboys, the one I'm talking about, that was published. This is the paper I saw that when I realized after I retired, I needed to come back because I wanted to make this better. Because what they realized is when they did this with 6 people who were over 60, had 2 control people that were in their 30s, measured 500 protein biomarkers, picked 75 of them, and they saw these biomarkers all markedly improve after they did the plasma exchange on these people. And this is a paper that they published, that old plasma dilution, which means TPE, reversed the biomarkers of aging. The immune system got better, the inflammation went down, oxidation went down, and their conclusion was this was because they had eliminated the age-related metabolic excess, which basically means as we get older, we produce more crap in our biology, and that's what making people older. But when I read this, I realized what they did was they removed the environmental toxins. They had figured out a solution that nobody had ever figured out before of how to get these things out. And that's why I got excited. I came back, I started working with my friends, and we put together this protocol. In addition to the PlasmaXchange, we have lifestyle changes that we start informing the patient of on the very first PlasmaXchange. We do it again on the 5th PlasmaXchange to reinforce with them, these are the things you need to do now that we're getting you clean so you can eliminate putting things in. We started adding supplements that we knew would help eliminate these toxins, reverse inflammation and oxidation. We started doing both oral therapy of medications and supplements, and we used everything that we knew from integrative medicine that you would need to do to make this even more powerful. And in fact, the results have been astounding. These are just some of the papers we used to formulate our protocol, as it has to do with everything the body needs to get it started again on the path of health. So if you really want to think about it, you ever walk into an old barn and find a Nova, that's what this is, 50 years it's been in the garage, 50 years it's been covered in dirt, plants are growing up inside it, there's no air in the tires, there's no oil in the crank, there's no gas in the tank, there's no spark in the plug. What we've done with PlasmaXchange is remove all the dirt and all the weeds. What we've done with the rest of the protocol is put air in the tires, gas in the tank, oil in the crank, sparks in the plug. And so what we did on the protocol as a timeline for you so you understand, this is a 6-month process that we ran these people through. We started out by doing 2 sets of labs. And in these labs, we measured 200 biomarkers on each patient, and then we repeated those a week later. So we would use everybody's biomarkers as their own control. We would then have the patient come in and do their lifestyle recommendation. This is the videotape that we have them watch. And then we would start the process of the PlasmaXchange. You'd get a PlasmaXchange, you go home with our nutrients, and you do it per our protocol. You come back every 28 days, we do it again, and you do this for a total series of 5. And then afterwards, we do, 2 weeks later, we did another set of labs. As Dr. Anderson would say, this is when the toxins would equilibrate. This is when we'd see a result. And I believe him completely. But I said, you know what? How long do they stay stable? Do they start reversing? So added to that, we started to do labs at 6 weeks as well. So we had 2 sets afterwards, one at 2 weeks and one at 6 weeks. And I'm going to get ready to show you the numbers that we had. And these are awesome. Before we started, I took 50 healthy patients between the age of 58 and 73, 25 men, 25 women, all healthy, all good weight, very minimal health problems. I selected these people because they were healthy, and we tested their biomarkers, especially had to do with the toxins. We tested 109 different toxins, and in those group of 50, we found 91 of them. And these were at levels that were at high critical levels. Mind you, the reference range we used for the toxins were the government NHANES reference ranges. So how much glyphosate, Roundup, is normal to have in our body? 0, right? It's supposed to be 0. The government says you can have 7 micrograms per gram, which is a lot. But we use the government's reference ranges to define toxicology, because what we want to do is show even the traditional world that we have a significant problem here. Of the patients we tested, the patient out of 109 who had the most had 33. The patient who had the least was 3. And on average, they had 13.2 toxins that were in the high critical range. Not only were in the high critical range, but 40% of them were in 2 standard deviations above the high critical range. That means instead of 7 in glyphosate, they were at 20. And that was the vast majority, that was the number one thing that we found in the patients we studied was Roundup. 74% of our patients had that toxins. Of those, half of them had them in 2 standard deviations above the critical range. How many patients had toxins this year? Were free of toxins? None. This is the first year that I didn't find anyone who had 0. We then took 5 men and 5 women, healthy people, aged between 60 and 70, and then we had 4 controls. At the time, we didn't know how much our protocol addition to the TPE would do, so we ran through 4 people, basically with the same protocol that Kiprop used, but in our data included group, we added all the lifestyle, nutrients, and medications. Before we started, as I mentioned, we checked 200 biomarkers. This is how many biomarkers, this is how many of the tests were abnormal out of 200 in each patient. And to be included in the study, they had to be abnormal on both the first and the second test. They had to be above the level that the government said. 54 was one lady, 25% of her biomarkers were in the high critical range. And even the person who was the best was only 10%, but still 10%. So we looked at all these different biomarkers of aging, and I did not cherry pick these markers to show you. I picked these markers because I felt these were the ones you would be most interested in and most knowledgeable with, because we have many of them that I'm sure, like we have the glycans that Dr. Martinez was talking about. I didn't know he was going to give that lecture. I would have put those on theirs as well. But we looked at the biomarkers of the immune system. This is the same thing that Kiprop did, is look at the T cells and the B cells and the natural killer cells. We also looked at the oxidative stress markers. We looked at 12 different oxidative markers. I'm showing you the 8 hydrodeguanine, and I'm also showing you the myeloperoxidase. 2 different type of oxidation effects. One of them is the direct effect on the DNA. The other is the enzymatic response to oxidative stressors in your periphery. We looked at inflammation. We looked at uric acid. We looked at C-reactive protein. We looked at interleukin 6, 1B, 6, 8, 10, but I'm going to show you guys interleukin 8 and tumor necrosis factor alpha. And we also looked at longevity markers like clotho protein. We looked at NAD intracellular, and we looked at beta-galactase, which is a measurement of senescence in every person. But we also looked at the toxins. I looked at heavy metals, all of them. I'm showing you 4 of them that we all know: lead, mercury, aluminum, and arsenic. And by the way, of all the toxins we tested on people, the top 5, number 1 was glyphosate, number 2 was lead, number 3 was mercury, number 4 was BPA, and number 5 was arsenic. So that's why I have those included in this, because they were the top 5 toxins in our group. We looked at the pesticides. We looked at all the DDTs and all their sisters. We looked at the phenols, and the one I'm showing you is BPA, because we all know that, and the triclosan. And then the mycotoxins, we looked at 1 from every category: the aflatoxins, the ochratoxins, and the ZEO. We looked at the phthalates. I showed you the 2 most common that you guys see in all the food particles. And then we looked at volatile compounds, the byproducts of petroleum. We were on a phone call, Dr. Anderson and I and Dr. Shi, and we were going over the data as the 2-week numbers came out. And Paul Anderson and I were like, holy shit. These numbers were huge. We're not talking about 2%, 3%. We're talking 50, 80, 90, 100%. We were marveling on what have we got here? What have we done? And Dr. Shi, who's the data scientist, is like, you guys are idiots. We're like, what's wrong? And he's like, you're looking at the numbers. You're not looking at the sign. I'm like, well, they're all going down, Jen. He goes, that's my point. Every patient we treated went down significantly. And he can say, because of that, not only did we take out the 100 that we were testing, we were taking out all 144,000 that are available, whether we could test them or not, because we were testing it wrong. So we've actually came up, whether we can test them or not, we're getting every toxin out of every person. As he said, he's only seen this kind of result in his 40-year career a very few times. And Dr. Anderson, who's the toxicologist, says in his 3 decades of this type of work and 20 years of writing papers and protocols for detoxins, he has never seen this type of data come out regarding toxins. We literally got them all out. So how much? Now, the TPE group is the group that only got PlasmaXchange, 5 of them. The protocol group is the group that had the lifestyle, the nutrients, the medications, IV and orally. And what we did is we looked at the 6 weeks numbers afterwards, And on the immune system, although you see the TP group did about the same as Kiprof's group did, about 10% higher, in our group it was between 25 and 50% improvement in all the immune system. In the inflammatory markers, they went down 10 to 12 and 1 to 50%, but in our group were between 25 and 90%. We looked at the oxidative markers, and not only did they go down, as he showed in his paper, by 10 to 30%, our group went down 25 to 50%. And the cloth, though, was really interesting because nothing that I know of has ever been able to improve the cloth of protein, but in our treatment group, it went up by 30%. The NAD went up by 90%, and the beta-galactase went up by 70%. And this confused me, because I was like, Jen, that means we have more beta-galactase after we've done this procedure. It should be less, right? I mean, if we're killing off the siancid cells, it'll go down, right? He goes, no, Paul. Initially, after you do this procedure, you're killing all the siancid cells. It's going to go up, and then it's going to come down. So part of Jen's complaint about Kiprof's study, when he looked at the siancid markers, where they all came down immediately. He said he doesn't think that they're really killing off the siancid cells because there was no bump. We have a significant bump. So the heavy metal, let's talk about the toxins. Aluminum, very high probability. That's one of the toxins associated with Alzheimer's. There has never been a way to get aluminum out of people. We got 100% out in our protocol, and it stayed out. We get arsenic out by 60%, the mercury out by over 50%, and the lead out by almost 90%. And compared to the TP group, they went down also, but our group was significantly higher in every area, statistically so. Like Jen said, when the numbers are this black and white, statistics are only a formality. The environmental toxins, went down from 40 to 60. The herbicides, the pesticides, all down by 50 to 70%. We're seeing the phenols, the phthalates, volatile compounds, and even the mycotoxins go down by 60 to 70%. How many people have treated their mycotoxin patients with a binder for years, and if you get a 30% decrease, you're good? Well, in 5 months, we lowered it almost 75%. These were exciting numbers to see. But the question is, when do they start coming back? Because the environment is filled, even with lifestyle changes, we should start seeing them come back. So what we decided to do is now this is our 2-week levels and our 6-week level. And the interesting thing that caught our attention is they got better between 2 and 6 weeks. So when do they start getting worse? That was one of the questions we had. So we started looking at it as well, and now the 6-month numbers are coming in, and they're even better than the 6 weeks number. Not only in the immune system, which we now see 100% increase, and the inflammatory markers are 40 to 70% dropped, even getting better, but even the metals that we don't have it because these people are just coming in, our group is just coming in, but these numbers are significantly lower. I was going to put the numbers here. I wasn't going to put the number here. June said I should, because all the numbers we've had with all the patients are coming in within a variance level that are relatively small. So he's like, Paul, all you need is 3 or 4 because we've already proved you don't need all 15. You only need 3 or 4 because they're all coming in with this margin of error. They're all acting the same way, which is great because it validates the data even more. So we're really excited about all this stuff. And in all these chemicals, the numbers were essentially better than even at the 6-week mark. So now we got that old car again. This is my favorite car. Found it in the barn. But what we can do with this program now is we can make this car run again. One of the things that we're struggling with and we're questioning is why at 6 weeks or 6 months are they even better than at 6 weeks? And our answer is that we're going to test out is we finally got the gunk out of the machine so the biomarkers and the biomechanics of the cell can work again. The mitochondria is working better, the detox pathways are better, and we're keeping them on these supplements, basically feeding them the gas in the air, and the body now is able to manage the level of toxins that it has and dropping it further, because the government is right. If the body isn't exposed to an overwhelming amount of toxins, it can clear them. The problem where the government's wrong is everybody is stalled on their toxins now because we all have critical high levels. It doesn't matter which part of the country you're in, you do your toxin testing, you'll see that I'm right. You're not going to be free. So I'm going to show you the data in a different format because everybody looks at information lower, and these numbers just keep getting better. So the red is what's considered the abnormal range of these levels. The green is the optimum range. And we see on the immune systems that the T cells, the B cells, and the natural killer cells are all, two of them, or one of them is markedly better, the helper cells. The suppressor cells and the natural killer cells, they're all trending in the right direction. And had I added the 60-day mark, or the 6-month mark in, they would all be in the green at this point, as I showed you, with 120% increase. Inflammation, they continue to drop, but they drop relatively quickly and they stay down. The oxidative stress drops down into normal ranges within 6 weeks after the protocol. The longevity markers are all trending up, and you can see the beta-galactase is doing exactly what Dr. She said it would, initially going up and now trending down, and we're going to retest this again, but we do believe that what we're going to do is see this is probably one of the most powerful senolytics that we've ever introduced into medicine. The heavy metals, lead, aluminum, mercury, all on every patient coming down to normal ranges within weeks after the procedure done. Herbicides, the same way. Pesticides, the same way. Phenols, the same way. Phthalates, and I'm not cherry picking these. All the 200 biomarkers are exactly like this. I'm just showing these because these are the ones that I hope most of you have at least some relationship to. Even the volatile compounds are coming down on the slides, which I think are available to you. You'll see the reference ranges that we used so you can see where the government says is a good range and what we were measuring against. And the mycotoxins are also falling. We got through this protocol for quite a bit, and then we went, you know what? Let's go look at the PFAs, and let's go look at the microplastics. Let's do that, shall we? And those are being tested right now, and I'm absolutely sure we're going to see a marked decrease in all of these because, as Dr. Shi said, they're all coming down. It's just a question of how much. We now have our samples over in Finland being weighed on the microplastics, and we have the PFAs coming back within the next month. But PFAs are all protein bound in general, so they're going to come out 95% like the phthalates will. So this is one of the first times in medicine that we got an answer here, and it's an answer for everybody. This is me when I was 38. This is me now I'm 62. It's kind of like that old car and that new car. I really do practice what I preach. I take my supplements. I exercise every day. I do my hormones. I've done TPE. I'm healthy. My biomarkers were abnormal. I wasn't completely clear, but I had pretty good heavy metal biomarkers because when I came into this field, heavy metals were the only thing, and I was sure that my heart disease had something to do with heavy metals. And for 20 years, I worked to get them down out of the red to the upper part of the green. And within 90 days, now they're all essentially zero. I've never been able to and they stayed down. I'm the first patient, not in this study, but I'm the first patient through the group. And I can tell where the numbers are going to come in, and luckily every number has come in very close to mine. So in conclusion, this protocol is safe. It's effective. We believe it's permanent to this point, but our group has a plan for keeping them down because there are ways to keep them down once they are down. And so we're going to be instituting that moving forward as well. But I want to leave you with one final thought here. We haven't been able to stop the government and the world from putting toxins into our environment. This is an existential threat that we're giving to our children and our grandchildren. But this is going to be able to give them a solution to be able to survive that toxic planet. I'd like to thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure.